Well, shalom and welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me again. We are continuing our series looking at the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. That is the short version of the Shulchan Aruch, or as I like to call it, the reference version of the Code of Jewish Law. And we are up to Siman number 3, which is entitled Laws Governing Putting on One's Garments and Proper Bearing. This is an absolutely fascinating subject, and I hope you find it half as interesting as I do. It's challenging. I just want to say that straight up. There's some things here that I'm going to read to you, and the Netzarim is going to completely jump straight in there and say, I ain't doing that. So just bear with me, and I'll try and do my best to explain what I'm actually reading here, and how you might be able to begin to take on some of the observances here that we're learning. Fascinating stuff. So number 1, it is written in Micah 6:8, and walk modestly with your Elohim. Therefore a person must conduct himself modestly in all of his ways. Thus, when putting on or taking off his robe, now this robe could be a nightgown of something of that nature, or any other garment worn directly upon his skin. So we're talking about, and it says here in the footnotes, underwear or pajamas. He should be very careful not to expose his body. Rather, he should put it on and take it off only when he is laying on his bed covered. And he should not say, here I am in an innermost room and in the dark, who will see me, even if I am not fully dressed? For the glory of the Holy One, blessed is he, fills the entire world, and darkness is as light before Hashem, may his name be blessed. Okay, so straight away, most people listening to this, without a from Orthodox Jewish upbringing, even some who possibly have that type of background and have maybe moved away from that, is challenged straight away. And they read this and they go, how am I going to do that? That's impossible for me. That's the response that I had, and I'm guessing that's a response that possibly many people that are watching this are having right now and reading that. But the idea is to, wherever you're at, to get to a place where, or start to get to a place where you can maybe minimize that time where you are completely naked. Even when you are alone at home in a room that is dark. If you study the life of the Baba Salih, who was a Moroccan Jewish sage that lived up to very recently, and he was a very righteous man, very, very famous. You will learn quickly how seriously he took the concept of modesty, even to the point where he would not only have his head covered always, but he would normally wear a garment that would cover the sides of his head as well. And you can read about his daily routine of how he would go and immerse, and how he would go about immersing himself every morning in a mikveh. And so rather than thinking, well, I can't do that, wherever you're at, maybe look at being aware that maybe you can reduce or minimize the time that you're exposed. And if you're married or you have a partner or anything like that, you can maybe discuss it with them and move in a way that's slow but deliberate. Okay, let's continue. Furthermore, acting with modesty and bashfulness brings a person to feel submission before Hashem, may his name be blessed. So it's talking there about how this is going to enable you to be able to more easily surrender to Hashem's will and other things if this was something that you begun to take on. So safe number 2, it is forbidden to follow the traditions of idolaters, and one may not imitate them, neither in modes of dress, nor in styles of hair and the like, as the verse states in Vayikra, Leviticus 20:23, do not follow in the traditions of the nations of the nation that I expel from before you. The footnote to that reads, this verse refers to the nations of the land of Canaan who engaged in immoral behavior. And so I also want to add here that this is talking about styles of hair and the wearing of clothing and types of clothing that are immodest and are related to idolatry. So it's not an avera, it's not a sin to wear a bit like a Western business suit. So I just wanted to clarify that. Elsewhere, the verse states in Vayikra 18:3, do not follow in their traditions. And in another context, the verse states in Devarim 12:30, beware for yourself lest you be attracted to follow after them. So this is where we start to get a hint that it's talking about traditions in wearing clothing and the way one chooses to groom themselves. That is going to bring about an attraction to the eye and enticement and possibly seduce somebody by the way a person is groomed and dressed. This prohibition applies only to practices that are marked by a lack of modesty or may have their origins in idolatrous rituals. So I was getting ahead of myself, there you go. And the footnote to that reads, for it is not forbidden to follow customs that have clearly developed for a specific benefit. There you go. A person should not wear an article of clothing that is designated by the nations to convey haughtiness, such as a garment worn by dignitaries. An example of this is the case mentioned in the Gemara, that it is forbidden for a Jew to imitate them, even with regard to the type of shoelaces that one wears. And I actually have the Gemara open with me to Sanhedrin 74a, which is what this is referring to here, and I will read it for you. Rav bar Rav Yitzhak said in the name of Rav, it refers even to a case where a Jew is ordered to change his shoelaces. If a Jew is ordered to do so in public or during times of oppression, even in private, he must allow himself to be killed rather than to comply. And the footnote to this reads, the Gemara refers to a locale where Jews tied their shoes in a more modest manner than non-Jews, or they wore shoelaces of a more modest color. Thus, our Gemara is teaching that whenever there is a distinctively Jewish way of doing things for a specific reason, e.g. modesty, it is a desecration of Elohim's name to depart from the custom in public or during times of oppression, even in private. As such, one must sacrifice his life rather than depart from Jewish custom in such circumstances. Now, that's bearing in mind that it is at a time of crisis, and in that time, whether it is in public or in private. See, the whole idea is to maintain a set apartness from the nations. And this even includes Noahides, believe it or not, because I read through this Masechet a little bit further, and I came across something really, really interesting, which I'm just going to quickly refer to now. This is sort of a bit of a sidetrack. I hope you're okay with this. The Gemara has taught that a Jew must sacrifice his life to sanctify Elohim's name. The Gemara questions whether a Noahide, it says Noahite with a T here, but I'll say Noahide, questions whether a Noahide is required to do the same thing. They inquired of Rabbi Ami, is a Noahide commanded to sanctify Elohim's name, or is he not commanded to sanctify Elohim's name? Now, before I read any further, it's important to just remind you that notice that there's a distinction from a Noahide to another person of the nations. And this is what I want to just quickly reiterate. Being a Noahide is not a small matter. It's not like, oh, I'm just a Noahide. It's actually, you are distinct from the other nations of the world if you consider becoming a Noahide. So let's continue reading. And this is a side note to what we're looking at in Siman 3 in terms of wearing modest clothing. The Gemara attempts to resolve this question. So this is looking at sanctifying the name of Hashem. Is a Noahide obligated to sanctify the name of Hashem? Meaning, if they're put to the test and their life is on the line, should they choose death rather than to desecrate the name of Hashem. And Abai said, come learn a proof from the following Beresa. Noahides were given 7 commandments. The Beresa then lists the 7, and the mitzvah of sanctifying Elohim's name is not included in the list. But if it were truly so that the Noahides are commanded to sanctify Elohim's name, then in reality there are 8 mitzvot that they must fulfill. Why then does the Beresa state that there is only 7? Evidently, Noahides are not obligated to sanctify Elohim's name. The Gemara dismisses this proof. Rav said to Abai, the Beresa means that Noahides are commanded to keep them, the 7 mitzvot, and all their ancillaries. What does that mean, all their ancillaries? Well, there's actually more than 7 Noahide laws, because each of those 7 laws, underneath it are sub-laws or ancillaries or caveats to these laws. And so let's look at the footnote there. That is, Noahides are required to observe not only the 7 basic Noahide laws, but also the various regulations associated with them. See Rashi here in Menechot, Tractate Menechot 73b. Thus, if a Noahide is threatened with death unless he commits one of these sins, he must indeed give his life and sanctify Elohim's name rather than commit the sin, according to Rashi. Very interesting. Let's get back into our core subject. A little bit sidetracked there. A person should not wear an article of clothing that is designated by other nations to convey haughtiness, such as a garment worn by dignitaries. We just read that. An example of this is the case mentioned in the Gemara. We just read that. Let's continue. Okay, so here's the explanation in the Siman, Siman 3, in regard to what designates that a Jew is forbidden to wear, or a Noahide for that matter. This means that if the manner of the other nations was to tie the shoelace one way, and the manner of the Jews was to tie it another way, or if it was their custom to wear red shoelaces, and the Jewish custom was to wear black ones, since wearing black is a mark of humility, self-effacement, and modesty, then it is forbidden for a Jew to change his custom to that of the other nations. And it's also important to point out here that black is a non-ostentatious color, meaning that it doesn't draw one's attention. And it's also quite practical color too, because it's easy to keep clean. You can wear a black garment a little bit longer than you can wear a white one, for example. And the whole idea is to not be somebody that wants to draw the world's attention to you. You don't want to be invisible, but you don't want to unnecessarily draw the eye of a person to you. And the Jews during the Holocaust found this out in such a painful way in the concentration camps. If a Jew had a particular look about him, or perhaps a tattoo, you can kind of join the dots there. All right, let's continue. So, okay. From this example, each person can learn to apply according to his own place and time that any garment designed to convey haughtiness or immodesty should not be fashioned, i.e. worn by a Jew. Rather, his garments should be fashioned such that they bespeak submission to Hashem, self-effacement, and modesty. This halakha is expressed through in Sifri, Parshat Re'eh 29, and you should not say, since the others go out dressed in purple, I too will go out dressed in purple. Since they go out adorned with armor, I too will go out adorned with armor. For these are arrogant and haughty practices, and they have no place within the nation of Yaakov, i.e. the Jewish nation. Rather, their manner of custom should reflect modesty and humility, and they should not turn to the arrogant nations as in imitation of their ways. Now, bear in mind, I just want to mention it again, that this is wearing clothing that is either immodest, is related to idol worship, or is a sign of haughtiness. Okay, so there's an addition there. because it is actually a good thing to be attired in such a way, like I said, that doesn't draw too much attention to oneself. But if that's at the sacrifice of those three things, then one is certainly not to follow in those practices. That is haughtiness, immodesty, and idolatry. If the clothing has, or the way one presents himself in a groomed way, if it contravenes those three things, then it's forbidden. Likewise, anything that non-Jews practice as a custom and an unexplained tradition, such that there is a reason to be concerned that it contains a trace of idolatry, a Jew must refrain from doing this thing. Now, I also want to add here a Noahide. One of the 7 Noahide laws is to refrain from idolatry. So this is something that a Noahide has to be abreast of. Likewise, he should not cut his hair, and nor should he grow the hair of his head like them. Rather, he should be distinct from them in his mode of dress and speech and in the rest of his actions, just as he is distinct from them in his beliefs and his character traits. This injunction is imparted by the verse as it says in Vayikra 20:26, I have separated you from the nations to be mine. One should not wear expensive clothing, for this brings a person to feelings of haughtiness. One should also not wear inferior or dirty clothing, so that he not be humiliated in the eyes of others. Rather, he should have clean clothing of average quality. As a rule, one should be prepared to sell even the beams of his house and use the funds thus obtained to buy shoes for his feet. Footnote says there is nothing more degrading than walking barefoot in public, according to Rashi, and this is in Tractate Shabbos 129a. It's interesting. Siman, Seif 4. Since we find that the Torah considers the right side more significant with regard to the temple service, which must be performed with the right hand, and with regard to the applications on the thumb and big toe in the service of the inauguration of the Mishkan and the purification of the Metzorah, that is somebody with spiritual leprosy, which are applied to the right hand and the right foot, and with regard to the mitzvah of Kitzur, that is a widow of a Kohen who is eligible to marry the living brother of the deceased Kohen, but is released upon the removal of a shoe, in which the Kitzur shoe must be removed from the right foot, as it says here. Therefore, and in other activities as well, one should always give precedence to the right over the left. Conversely, when taking off one's shoe and other garments, he should take off the left shoe or side of the garment first, and since taking it off in this order also gives respect to the right side, as it remains in the most honorable state of being dressed for a longer time. So this causes you to be thinking very deeply about doing these sort of daily mundane activities, which I find is fascinating. However, with regard to articles of clothing that require tying, the left side is considered more significant, since the tefillin are tied onto the left arm. Therefore, when donning any articles of clothing that require tying, he should tie the left side first, although the right side is put on first. For example, when tying shoes with laces, he should first put on the right shoe, but he should not tie it, and he should then put on the left shoe and tie it, and afterward tie the right shoe. Now, this is where, somebody from like a Christian who's very still much in the Christian like thinking, or somebody with Hebrew roots, throws their hands up in the air and go, oh, this is exactly what Yeshua spoke against. No, it's not what he spoke against. In fact, the whole idea behind this is to keep a person's awareness, even whilst doing the most mundane of activities, of the Kodesh Baruch Hu, that is the Holy One, blessed be He. And this would be something that Yeshua would be all for, provided that that is why you're doing it. You're not doing it to think that you're superior to other people, or that you're going to get, another feather in your cap or something like that. You're doing it to give honor to Hashem and for service for Hashem. And obviously, if you're rushed, or there's a war on, or there's something, and you can't go into the minute detail and the process of thinking that you would otherwise be able to do in the comfort of your own home, where time is not pressing on you and putting on a shoe and tying it up, fine. So the whole idea of all of this is to build one's awareness and sensitivity to every moment. Some people say, I have real difficulty living in the moment. If you're such a person that has difficulty living in the moment, then studying the Torah and studying the oral Torah, that's gonna be the biggest remedy you'll ever find. If you're one who struggles with living in the moment. Okay, so Save 5. One should take care to avoid putting on 2 articles of clothing at once, because this has a negative effect of causing forgetfulness. Interesting. Save 6. It is forbidden to walk 4 amos or recite words of holiness with an uncovered head. Remember, up until 100 or so years ago, probably less than that, a piece of headwear was considered part of one's overall attire. If one just simply goes back to the Melbourne Cup in Australia in the 1930s and sees a panoramic sweeping photograph of the Melbourne Cup, you will have a very difficult time finding an uncovered head in that photo, which includes thousands of people in it. If you do see a head that's uncovered, it's probably a child or a baby. So the whole idea of a head covering is that it is part of one's overall attire, and one should always be appropriately attired. The priesthood were commanded to wear a head, some type of head covering, and so we are all about supporting the priesthood, because the reality is that the Jewish nation, the entire nation, are a priestly class nation of all mankind. And the priesthood within the nation of the Jews is a hierarchy of their overall priesthood. So have a think about that next time you're wondering if wearing a head covering is something they should do. I have a video on it that I encourage you to have a look at on the head coverings in the Messianic movement. I'm trying to think of the name of it. Can't remember the name, but just go through. The video's not too far down from this one. One should also accustom children to cover their heads, so that they should have the fear of Hashem upon them, as we find related in the Gemara about Rabbi Nachman bar Yitzchak. When Rabbi Nachman bar Yitzchak was young, his mother was told by astrologers, "Your son will be a thief." From that time on, she never allowed him to uncover his head. She told him, "Cover your head so that the fear of heaven should be upon you." And you can read about that in Tractate Shabbos 156b. And the whole story is that she was told by astrologers that her son would become a wicked person, a murderer, in fact. And so upon hearing that, she had her son's head covered 99% of the time. And so the son got accustomed to wearing something upon his head. And one day, while he was still an adolescent, he was sitting under a palm tree or a fig tree, and the wind blew and it knocked his head covering off. And he stood up and he looked at the fruit of the fig tree, and the fig tree didn't belong to him, it belonged to somebody else. He had a desire to eat the figs of this tree that didn't belong to him. And he was shocked that he was thinking about that, and he looked down and saw that his head covering was on the ground. And it dawned on him that had he maintained his head covering, kept it on, his Yetzer Hara wouldn't have been able to come up with this proposition or this temptation before him. So it's an interesting story. I have covered that in another one of my videos too. Okay, so Save 7 and 8. It is forbidden to walk with an erect posture or an outstretched neck, i.e. holding one's head high. As the verse states in Yeshayahu, Isaiah 3:16, with regard to a haughty manner of the daughters of Zion, they would walk with outstretched necks, etc. Nevertheless, one should not bow his head excessively while walking. Rather, his head should be positioned at an average incline, enough that he can see a person coming toward him. So when you're walking and you're keeping your head down, don't be stupid about it and have your head so far down that you walk into a pole, but have it at sort of a medium distance. And it's something that I think many men sort of struggle with, is that rubbernecking all the time, especially when they go to if you have to go to a shopping or public area, some sort of plaza. You'll be like doing these ones, and it's only a matter of time before something gets you, and you've got to think about that. Is when I walk out in public, what's my head doing, even before something happens? And so you want to cut it off at the neck, no pun intended, and go, okay, why am I looking around like that? Why can't I just look a little bit ahead of me? I can still see everything, but what am I looking for? I mean, why am I looking around like this? What do I think I'm going to miss out on something? And so this is something that you might want to have a look at, rectifying, is how you're conducting yourself as you're walking around in public. If you have to go out in public into a place where, because you can't control who goes there. You can't control how people dress or act or speak. So it's about doing everything that we can to minimize a disaster. Nevertheless, one should not bow his head excessively while walking. Rather, his head should be positioned at average incline, enough that he can see a person coming toward him, but also that he can see his own steps. That's from Harav Rabbeinu Yonah in his Sefer HaYirah. In Sefer HaYirah. Sefer HaYirah. Even from the way a person walks, it can be discerned whether he is a wise and intelligent person. I'll say that again. It can be discerned whether, even from the way a person walks, it can be discerned whether he is a wise and intelligent person. Okay. Or a mindless fool. King Shlomo, in his wisdom, expressed it in Kohelet 10:3. So let's look at the footnote for mindless fool, how they can tell. 21, e.g. it is improper to run in public or walk in a wild, unrestrained manner. Okay. See Rambam Helikot Diot 5:8. And this is what it says in Ecclesiastes 10:3, Kohelet 10:3. Even on the road, as a fool walks, he lacks sense and proclaims to all that he is a fool. I.e., by the nature of his gait, he informs everyone about himself that he is a fool. And you can see that in the way, some of the trends and the clothing that men wear and the way they wear it and the way they walk and their gait and their bearing. They're just sort of, their chest is out, they're kind of walking like they're sort of half dancing, and it's a walk that you can just see is designed to attract a mate. Just so obvious. And it's like, no. But again, we are no better than them. We're just being made aware of our own failings, of our own shortcomings, and we should be trembling about that. But it still should be something that bothers you. But you're not seeing them and condemning them. You're just, if anything, it makes you sad. Okay, so number 8. This is the last safe. It is proper to take care that a man not walk between two women. One must also take care not to walk between two dogs or two swine. Likewise, two men should not allow a woman to walk between them, nor should they allow a dog or a swine to walk between them. So what this is talking about is it actually can have an effect on a person as to one's proximity, where they actually are positioning themselves physically in terms of their distance. And whether there's two males standing in a line and a female in the middle of them, a pious person would just skip out of the line if they found themselves to have a woman in front of them particularly, and then another man in front of them. So what do the footnotes say for this? That's interesting. The Gemara in Hariyot 13b states that walking between two women will cause a person to forget his learning. Oh my gosh. Rabbi Yehuda HaPenini Otzi HaPerushim to Hariyot explains that he will be distracted by the woman, and this will cause the loss of focus. Okay, that's fairly self-explanatory. That last part anyway. Footnote 23. or to swine. So this is not to walk between two dogs or two pigs. The Gemara in Pesukim, Tractate Pesukim 111a states that walking between these creatures or surrounding them, see below, creates an aura that can be damaging to a person's health. See Gemara for the Gemara in Pesukim 111a again for details of this law. Wow, thank you so much for joining me on the next Siman, Siman 3 on the laws of putting on garments and proper bearing. It has been fantastic to be able to do this and to be able to learn with you, and I hope you join me again, Hashem willing, for the next video. See you again. Bye now.